so I understand the question. You mean, what are the different challenges outside of central sort of core cities that we think about? I think, part of, I think we alluded to this issue earlier, which is really around access, right? And how does mobility or transportation help underserved communities in that sense where transportation isn't as easily accessible? I certainly take for granted that, I pull up my mobile phone and there's like 5 different apps I can use to figure out how to get from A to B, and that's certainly not the case in many communities. So I think from our perspective, we always look for, and I think we've done a great job with partnering with the Go Boston initiative with some of the underserved communities on transportation, like Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, but really helping find solutions where there is a need to fill that gap and that need for transportation, just as a commuter in those cases. So, we take a pretty methodical, science-driven approach to supply and demand and how we run the business. So looking at where the demand is, and demand, could be driven by many needs, and access to the last mile to transportation is certainly one that we certainly look at.
I mean, transportation is definitely a regional issue, and we have a governance structure in Massachusetts that makes that very challenging. 351 cities and towns, which is hard to sort of pull together in any sort of way, shape, or form. Even though, so we paint a pretty rosy picture of what it's like here, but even within the city of Boston, right, so the neighborhood of Mattapan, sort of southern tip of the city, your sort of experience to get downtown is pretty awful right now, right? And it shows out on the data too, so the average commute for somebody in Boston is about 29 minutes. A full quarter of people live in Mattapan takes them over an hour to work, right? So there's some big disparities in what the experience is like and how good the service is, in like just somebody that lives in the city of Boston, right? And I think that's a big challenge for us on how we can make sure that we are focusing on that and are being equitable and how we sort of address that going forward.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I picture the sort of person who lives in the suburbs, or thinking about my in-laws in Woburn, listening to this conversation, like, what are you guys talking about? Not much has changed in the last 10 years, and I still definitely need a car. So it's definitely a problem that hasn't been licked yet. I think that, honestly, autonomous is going to help a lot there. The more you lower transportation costs, that elusive first and last mile problem to get to commuter rails, I think that's a huge opportunity there. And then if you can fix that problem for a lot of people, then commuter rail and less dense fixed rail becomes a much more popular solution for people, and then it makes more sense to build out. I think always lower density areas are going to be a bigger challenge for building really good world-class transit systems. There's a reason Tokyo and, I don't know about but that is. But I live in Hong Kong, amazing transportation system, but it's because it's super, super dense. So it's a bigger challenge. I think that we'll see, but I'm hopeful about autonomous helping us solve it.
So just to pick up that thread on autonomous until we get to the regional question, we get asked very frequently at nuTonomy to explore with urban planners who are starting to push out a little bit to provide autonomous shuttles to the closest access point for transit, so that people can live in these places and still live car-free. So from a regional perspective, I have less personal knowledge, but one thing that stood out to me, we recently, I guess it was in February, it was and now it's August, but we had a Boston Mobility Roundtable with a number of the innovative companies of transportation here in Boston, and Kris and some of his colleagues from the public sector came along. And one of the things that really stood out to me, sort of to pick up on your NLAW point, was one of the representatives from the state said, this is great to know that some of these business models even exist. And I think we are in our bubble here, and we're in it, living, eating, breathing it every day, and it is important to pick our heads up and realize that people outside the cities, this is a completely foreign concept a lot of the times, being able to just, pick up your phone, tap an app, and get to where you want to go with multiple choices to serve that. So we do have to be mindful to look around sometimes outside of the immediate urban core.
So moving on to public transit, as these different solutions emerge. How do you see that affecting public transit in the future of it here in Boston? And, you know, if you want to comment in general.
My hope would be that the impact on public transit is increased use in public transit. The more we can move people to a multimodal mindset, and I suspect that business models will start to move toward a subscription-based service for your transportation. So almost like car owners now have their car payment every month. You pay it and you don't even really think about the incremental cost per trip. I suspect we'll move towards subscription-based models for our transportation that will be multimodal. You pay a subscription price per month, and that gets you access to multiple modes, whether it's a point to point as an individual or as a shared trip, as a bike. I think there are apps that are trying to do this now. I think we're a ways away. There's lots of different consumer-oriented brands that really want to protect their user base, understandably. But I do think ultimately, at least that's where I hope things go.
Yeah, so I hope this isn't a trade secret, but I remember when I was at Zipcar and the lawyers might be competitive data. Zipcar, it could be totally different now, but Zipcar did best in cities that had really robust public transportation systems. And at Lyft now, it's the same thing, right? It's kind of the opposite of what you'd expect if you just didn't think at all about intermodality and things like that. You would think, well, if transit isn't good, then people will use these other services because that's all we get around. But it's repeating what we're all saying, what I think we all know intuitively, having lived it, is there's sort of two types of people and two types of lifestyle. There's the I own a car and I drive everywhere I go, and then there's the I don't own a car or I don't use a car as my primary mode of transportation. I use all sorts of other things, right? So I'm on the red line in the morning, I take a Lyft somewhere else later that day, and I get in a Zipcar when I need to haul something, all those things. So I think it really all works in concert. We've seen that in the numbers. I also think that, particularly in Boston, the subway will be the core of the transportation system for as far as I can see. I just don't think that anything beats, getting 200,000 people to work and back. In a very crowded urban environment than a subway. So I think that will still be in 20 years the way that most of us will get around.
Can I just show of hands in the room? This is going to be a totally biased sample, but who took a trip on public transit today? Anybody that walked today? Yeah. Or rode a bike? Yeah. All right, so we are not the average room, but we definitely prove out the case that public transit is a growing way. We definitely need to make investments in it. It is the backbone, not just to getting people around in Boston, but to, frankly, our economy as well. I think you're seeing that bear out across the country. Cities that have good public transportation systems are also thriving. Places that people want to live, right? There's a livability component to having a good public transportation system. And even cities like Houston, right, is reorganizing all their buses, Kansas City too, because they recognize that they need to do that to be competitive in the marketplace, to attract people to live in that city.
I think I echo, a lot of what these guys have said already. I don't see public transport going anywhere soon. I hope not. And it's more, I think, where the evolution is really around the intermodality of all these different business models that we just spoke about. And Tyler's a great example, right? You're using all three, and I personally, I take the commuter in the morning, I walk home, I use a car, honestly, and so I think that it's the interoperability between all the different options that I think make cities really function well. So.
Yeah, I would just add on that, that our research has been showing a lot of what you're talking about, that, in the cities where transit use is doing well, those are also the cities where Uber and Lyft are doing well, that we're not, and this is research that hasn't been released yet, so you're getting a little preview, but we're not actually seeing the correlation of, Uber and Lyft going up and transit going down. We see those happening independently of each other, that there's a lot of different factors, and we're still working through a lot of this data, but the places where there's a lot happening in all the modes, you know, so it's sort of reinforcing, I guess, what your early data was at Zipcar, that, you know, good transit city is a good car share city, it's a good bike share city, it could be even a good TNC city as well. And then mobility as a service, I just, because you brought that up, that idea, and you know, we've seen certainly in some European cities where that model is being tested, the buying a package of services, and the concept that you can actually shift people from mode to mode by providing discounts, by having the data to move people, is a really interesting one for future, you know, congestion management as well as options for people.